On its face, it doesn't really make sense. In a trade universe worth trillions, why is everyone talking about whiskey and wine?
A major sticking point in this trade war has been the absence of U.S. alcohol on Canadian store shelves.
It's weird because, and follow me here, alcohol is not and is nowhere close to being a top trade issue between Canada and the U.S. Energy, meaning oil mainly, Canada pumped $170 billion worth to the U.S. last year. The auto industry, one of the most lucrative between the two countries, worth $75 billion to Canada. There are all sorts of ways this country makes money from American customers, but alcohol is just a tiny, tiny fraction of overall trade that you basically have to zoom in to see on this chart. And yet, alcohol keeps coming up as this central bargaining chip, this seemingly outsized emphasis on an industry that on a macro level simply should not be on Donald Trump's radar, except clearly it is, because it hits a nerve.
It is outrageous that Canada will not put U.S. spirits on the shelf. It is insulting.
It is.
And disrespectful to America.
There is not a chance in hell that U.S. alcohol is going back on the shelf in British Columbia.
It's enough of a splinter in talks that the White House singled it out for these massive 50% tariffs everybody's freaking out about that were meant to be imposed earlier this week, except they were paused at the last minute, and now Team Canada is scrambling to get some kind of alcohol concession together so that, please, for the love of God, can we just make a deal? Why? Now, I don't mean to minimize how important alcohol is to those whose business it is. Of course, breweries, wineries, distillers, these are all part of a billion-dollar industry that matters. But they're also easy targets. When Trump began his presidency with a trade war against Canada, yes, it was about cars and steel and dairy, but Canada's response was a bit like trade guerrilla warfare.
We are going to be pulling U.S. products off of Liquor Mart shelves.
I have directed BC liquor sales to immediately stop buying American liquor from red states.
Starting today, LCBO, the largest purchaser of alcohol in the world, will begin removing U.S. products from its store shelves.
The cunning here was that Canada never had to put a tariff on American whiskey because it had the power to simply stop buying it. And for most Canadian customers, losing the option to buy American, I think it's fairly easy to substitute, right?
I think we could live without some of the stuff, like the bourbon coming in from the United States.
I'd much rather buy like BC wine anyways, so local's always better, I guess.
It's not like specialized machinery, like auto parts or aerospace widgets that are deeply embedded in very intricate Canada-U.S. supply chains. If I can't get California wine, I'll get Canadian wine, and my evening will still hum along just fine.
What's unique about this is it doesn't cost Canada anything. It's simply a matter of putting it back on the shelves. So it's not like we have to give something up.
And I think for the Canadian government, there was the added impact of making this fight really resonate directly with Canadians. As in, it's not just some arcane tariff math happening between importers and exporters. You can see with your own eyes when American liquor comes off store shelves. That was a bit of a rallying cry. And if I'm being honest, a marketing opportunity all its own.
We're trying as much as we can as a family to buy all Canadian now, just to make sure that we're spending our money here.
Canadian-made goods now. We're making a conscious effort to do that.
But this bit of national unity also exposed what has come to be, for the U.S., a very irritating aspect of Canada's economy.
The premiers are the ones who ultimately have the authority over what gets stocked and doesn't get stocked.
Yes, in most of Canada, the decision on what American alcohol to import is not a private business decision. It's the jurisdiction of provincial governments. This is the opposite of a free market. For example, in Canada's biggest province, it's the Liquor Control Board of Ontario, the LCBO, that is the sole importer, wholesaler, all-around gatekeeper. In Quebec, it's the Société des Alcools du Québec, the SAQ. And Even when these government bodies aren't acting as complete monopolies, like in Ontario, which recently let convenience stores sell booze, they still control the supply chains. So, for example, Loblaws in Ontario still has to buy all their stock directly from LCBO. Alberta's different. They privatized everything. But broadly, this is how alcohol in Canada works. And the US objects strongly to both the fact that it works this way and how expensive this can be for them. The White House proclamation, which most recently ordered a 50% tariff on more than $20 billion worth of Canadian goods, it cited Canada's provinces and territories several times as bringing unreasonable and unequal impositions and discriminations. And in this recent report on foreign trade barriers, the U.S. Trade Representative called out how these provinces greatly hamper exports of U.S. wine, beer, and spirits to Canada. And his office lists a slew of specific irritants: cost of service markups, restrictions on listings, label requirements, distribution policies. They're basically saying, you can't claim to want free trade while your government-controlled liquor system just shuts out our products. Then consider the cost. Canada isn't the biggest export market for American alcohol, but it is one of the biggest. When Canada collectively pulled U.S. booze from store shelves, the results were disastrous. Hundreds of millions of dollars in sales lost that weren't easy to replace. And this had a devastating impact on those businesses who for years have counted on Canadian customers, because the bottom line was no buyers, no production, no business. And that outcome makes for really bad politics.
But hurt domestically in the United States, California, Kentucky, Tennessee, those producers would have seen a direct hit to them, and that creates political consequences in those markets.
This alcohol is extremely important to the economies of these parts of the United States, and the loss of Canada, which in many cases is the largest export market, is something that has been felt greatly.
What went wrong? Who caused the problem? Why can't we sell our bourbon? Why can't we sell our wine?
So now, with Trump threatening a fresh tariff war with Canada, we're back where we started, with Mark Carney in the unenviable position of having to ask the provinces for a favor.
Mark Carney is asking premiers in the 8 out of 10 provinces where it's not on shelves to put it back.
But this is complicated by the fact that Canada is complicated. Alberta and Saskatchewan had already restored consumer access to American alcohol before all this tariff mess unfurled again. But just about every other province is weighing Carney's request on this spectrum between okay, maybe, and
It is possible that we put back the alcohol on the shelves of the SAQ, but we need first to have the analysis.
When we put the American booze back on the Liquor Mart shelves, Canadians, leave it there. Spend your money on Canadian products that are going to employ people in our country and that have an administration that respects Canada.
These are provinces that mostly have more or less the same point of leverage on alcohol, but vastly different interests otherwise. In Ontario, for example, you have the LCBO, which is widely cited as the single largest purchaser of alcohol in the world, thanks to its monopoly. It has not yet restocked its shelves with American liquor because what Premier Doug Ford cares about is cars, and that tariff issue has yet to be resolved.
Premier Ford has struck a nerve, of course, with the U.S. administration on being one of the first movers on the alcohol ban. The large tariff rates that apply to those sectors that are hit by the 232 tariffs, steel, aluminum, autos, etc., do disproportionately impact Ontario.
That would become a trade-off that for Premier Doug Ford would be, look, if this is going to help protect auto jobs, I'll gladly put their booze back on the shelves.
Similarly, if a deal is done without major gains on something like softwood lumber, that may change the calculus for provinces like British Columbia, Quebec, and New Brunswick, who individually control their own supply and sale of alcohol. So at the end of the day, we can see why this is messy. It is a pain point, but also a test case for just how fiercely Canada is willing to protect what the US sees as an insufferable barrier that it wants gone.